everyone. How are you all doing? While we are waiting for you to join, I'm also waiting for Seema to join us. Are you ready for the third episode? Today we'll discuss a very sensitive, for me, topic, and I'm a little bit worried about the internet. Internet in Istanbul is Seema is joining. The internet in Istanbul is definitely, or maybe it's in my house, in my neighborhood, is not very stable. All right, here you are. Good
Hello,
evening,
Natalia. Can you
Seema.
see me okay?
Yes,
Or maybe you can't see me.
I can see you perfectly well. Finally,
Ah,
finally. I
good.
guess every time Instagram surprises us.
It's
How are you doing?
does. I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
I'm really good today compared to the last week. Last week was a little bit tough for me, so I don't know what was
Yes.
going on. I believe it was something in the air, or maybe the planets were in the
Mhm.
wrong order. Something like that was happening.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, there's been a lot of change in the weather here, let's say in
Yeah,
Istanbul.
right.
I'm just trying to get my camera set up right so everyone can just see me properly.
You are
Perfect.
beautiful. You look gorgeous. We can see you. We can hear you.
Perfect.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. I was just sharing that the internet I wanted to blame the entire country, then just limited it to Istanbul. Then I said, okay, maybe it's in my apartment that it's not always stable. But
No, I
anyway,
actually today had some really problems with my internet today as
mhm,
well. And then having some lessons online, which didn't help because our connection was not very stable, let's
right.
say.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had the same issue. But let's hope that it all goes well today.
Yes, I'm sure it's going to go very well.
So shall we get
Yes,
going?
I think we're all ready to get going, and I think our viewers are ready to listen as well.
Yes. And welcome everyone to Where Shall We Start, a podcast where we delve into the fascinating world of language learning and teaching, because they always go together. And I'm Natalia. One day maybe we'll need to discuss the issue of names. And joining me is my wonderful co-host, Seema.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening to everyone. How are you all doing? I hope you're all well. And of course, it's a lovely Monday evening here in Istanbul. We're excited to kick off. So I think Natalia, we're ready. Yes, everything's set up and going well.
Yep, definitely.
Good.
Definitely ready.
Okay. Do you see, by the way, if you have any viewers who've linked in right now? Can you see if there's anyone who's joined?
I see one, but maybe it's only us.
Mhm.
Maybe people are joining, and
Yeah.
in case if nobody has joined yet, then they'll have to watch the beginning.
Yes, and we have this. Let me just quickly make a quick announcement to our viewers. Just in case you didn't have time to join us live, we do have all our recorded podcasts ready on both our pages. So you can always refer back to Natalia's page or to my page, and you can listen in whenever you like.
Right, right.
Okay, I'll get started then, Natalia. All right,
Your
so
turn. It's still your turn.
it's still my turn and I still don't know where to start. Actually, I just would love to sometimes just chat with Natalia as well because we don't see each other. Well, we don't get to see each other so often. So again, welcome back everyone. And we're excited to kick off today's episode titled Embracing Vulnerability in Language Learning and Teaching. So in this episode, we'll be exploring the power of vulnerability in our language journey, both as learners and as educators. So where shall we start?
I guess the best way to start is, first of all, I really want to apologize for such a complicated title, but guys, I was the one who insisted that we have to discuss this topic, as after I started working with Seema, I realized I'm very self-conscious of my language, of how I sound, whether I have mistakes or anything. And like I said, I really want to discuss this topic of vulnerability. But I guess the best way to start is to clarify what it is, because this topic is widely discussed. Like, you go to TED Talks, you go to any webinars, everybody is speaking about this topic. But what does it mean to us as language learners and teachers? For me, language learning is about being open to mistakes, and also embracing the discomfort of not knowing, or of how people will perceive you. Because just yesterday I shared with my audience this episode from my life, and I thought I got over it. I thought, like, I'm cool, I don't care about these things, I'm just like, all one. It was tough for me. It took me 2 days to write this post. And after I sent it, I posted it in stories, I literally closed my eyes and I didn't check Instagram for a few hours. I realized I was quite emotional about sharing my embarrassing moment. So this desire to make mistakes, this desire to feel this discomfort of feeling that, what if I'm going to be judged? Especially, I'm a language teacher. How could I do such a mistake, and so on? I believe this is very important to embrace, to accept, and to ready to do when we are learners. And it doesn't matter what proficiency level we have. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Natalia just mentioned just there. And it's so true that the expectations of sometimes our students is, well, you're a teacher, you shouldn't make any mistakes. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. And be it native or non-native, we can make mistakes. I want to admit something, and some people might actually know this about me. I'm terrible at spelling sometimes. Honestly, some of the most simple things, when you're really engaged in your lesson, you sometimes make little mistakes, even with pronunciation. But mostly with me, I am notorious for my bad spelling. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. So it's all
Do you
about.
know? Can I
Yes,
interrupt?
yes, Natalia.
Because, like, you said this, I'm like, I don't, for this spelling, when I was a child in Russia, when we had the spelling dictations, the
Uh-huh.
way I was learning the words was like, beautiful, literature, like that's how I was writing. And
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm working with a student, and we have some difficult word,
Mhm.
and a student doesn't know how to spell it, and they need to type it on the platform. I'm like, give me a second, I'll spell it for you, and you can write. And then I make a pause, and then my student will say, Natalia, are you saying it like in these Russian syllables, how to pronounce it? So, like, yeah, guys, you immediately made me think about it.
Yes, and
So,
it's so true that we all do it as teachers. Sometimes we all do this, like trying to actually make that student feel comfortable in their language and in their
yeah.
mother tongue. So often helping the child to spell something in English, but using the phonetical sounds of their own language, which can happen quite often, but it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
So it's all about shedding our fears of judgment, actually, and embracing the learning process wholeheartedly. So how is it for you to be vulnerable in your classroom, or when you're learning a language? Natalia, could you shed some light on this
Um,
for us? Thank you.
you know, it is something that is, I often have memories from my personal experience when I was learning it, and
Mhm.
I was always like a good student with good grades. And whenever we started a new topic, and when teacher asked me like some question about it, I really froze up. because I immediately was thinking, do I remember it correctly? Do I remember the formula of this tense, for example, or the structure of this sentence? What if I don't know the word? And you know, there were all these emotions on my face going through it, and I was like computer calculating, can I say it or not? Because I'm a good student, I cannot fail now. And I remember like this, I'm speaking about it, and I just like feel it, how it was happening to me. And the same I see with my students. They really want me to correct their mistakes. Or
Absolutely.
I ask a question and they're sitting there and like, staring at me, and I realize this is this computing process of how much of a mistake can I allow myself? How
Yeah,
much can I tolerate it? And so this is definitely a tough process that takes lots of energy.
it is. And you just reminded me of, I had a kind of a flashback when you were saying that to my A-level times. When I was in high school in England, we had a really nice English teacher. I mean, I'll never forget the impact that he had on me to really love English literature. So obviously during our A-level process, we have to do lots of literature books and look at the classic English titles like Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein and other books like that. So I just remember when it was always like my teacher would pick me to read a part from the book or a chapter, and I'd always question myself before reading. I'd feel kind of just how you said, like, am I reading this correctly? Am I good enough to read in front of my teacher? Because I almost thought my teacher was like Shakespearean. The way he spoke was quite with a very kind of Shakespearean accent, and his knowledge, obviously. This made me a bit vulnerable. This made me feel like, should I trust myself? And obviously, even though I was learning my mother tongue and going through this process, you still question yourself about things like this. Did you want to add anything else, Natalia?
Just like I just wanted to like I'm listening to you and I'm like like that dog like looking at you like yes yes, and I'm like I realize on the one hand I want to be professional and I want to say like you see students, it's even native speakers who have moments like this,
Yeah.
so you don't need to worry about it, but inside myself I'm like, oh, thanks God, she also had this. So I'm not alone. And it's like, it's not about me. Anyone can have this, I have like these two controversial feelings in it. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, we can share stories about it. A
Definitely.
lot of stories, I'm sure.
Yes, and just by talking, just having these moments to have our conversations every Monday evening, it's so exciting because it does give you flashbacks of times when you were a teacher, times in your past in different teaching institutes, or even as a student when you were learning the English language. So yeah, it does help to have these conversations because it just makes you realize how important it is. So,
Right.
just to make another point, there have been times, even as a native teacher, so I wanted to come back and give you another example, when I felt vulnerable. And this was actually very recently I remember working in an institute, and one of the native students approached me about a pronunciation thing that we were doing. We're doing like an activity about using correct pronunciation. And he found it quite humorous because I would say a word, for example, water or butter, or for example, bottle. And then he would kind of like giggle. And I was like, is something wrong? Did I say it wrong? And he just found it really quite humorous, not in an offensive way, but I kind of realized that, yeah, even the accent, as you remember, we discussed before, even an accent can expose your vulnerability in this way as well. So my student obviously was from a different country. I think he was American or Australian. I can't remember now. But yeah, even the difference in an accent can also cause this kind of vulnerability as well. And seeing as we're both natives, but we both laughed about it in the end. So it was quite nice.
Exactly. And this vulnerable point is also like the fact that, and here I'm kind of speaking more to the students even, sometimes we're teaching a lesson or like speaking about something and the students are giggling, like you said, it. And that's when we become very self-aware. And this idea, however confident we are, I believe every person goes through this moment. Are they laughing at me? Am I doing something wrong? And this is the point where, like, to allow yourself to be vulnerable and either ask, like you did, just like was like something like wrong with it, or just like brush it off and think like, okay, it's like something they're laughing at, just like between themselves, but not about me. Like, this is also a very vulnerable point when we are standing there in front of a group of students. It is a very vulnerable position.
It is. It is. And as a teacher, you're exposing yourself, actually. You're exposing everything about the way you present your language in front of the students. And it's very normal to make a mistake. And you are learning along with the students. Of course, you are trying to teach them the technical side maybe of the language, or doing some reading activities, or even teaching them some vocabulary games. But even throughout this process, it's just nice to have a little laugh sometimes with your students. And you know that no one's offending the other person. You're literally just finding it humorous and finding it amusing that, look, my accent's different to yours. I say some words slightly different to the way you say it. So that's absolutely fine, because that is the idea about learning languages, that you embrace all of this, as you mentioned, embracing this vulnerability.
Exactly. And, just like to continue this topic of vulnerability in teaching, I thought of also another moment, like one thing, like when we are in front of the class and just like some emotions are going on there, how we react to them is one thing. But another thing I thought for vulnerability for us as a teachers is accepting, acknowledging and actually saying that I don't know something. I had this again. I mean, I don't know. I feel when I was young, I loved going through the most painful learning experience because I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable. I still remember the time when I still lived in Russia. I worked at a teacher training college, so I was like a teacher trainer. And one student comes to me and asks a word. And it was some kind of old word. They were reading some, not Shakespeare, but something like from that era. And the student asked me a word, and I realized I have no idea what that word meant. But I was embarrassed. Like I was young. I was like, a proud teacher. I couldn't say that I don't know. And I just like invented something, just like said my guess. And guess what? It was totally wrong. And the next day, the students came and told me actually. And I still remember that point. And like, after that, I came to this thing. If students ask me something and I don't know it, it's better to say that I don't know. It's now I say it easily. Like I always say, we have lots of resources. We have this easy access to Google and other things to find information. So I don't even feel embarrassed. For some time, it took me time to get used to the fact that to say, guys, I don't know. Let's check it together. Or just this is the homework. Go find it. Because it's more embarrassing than to tell something just to invent it and later learn from the same student that that was wrong.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's the best way to approach a student in this way. If we're not sure about something, it's absolutely fine to say to a student, you know what, I'll get back to you on that, or let's research it together. Let's have a look together. So it's important to admit this to students as well, because at the end of the day, we can't keep all our knowledge in that space of time. Sometimes we do, we might not be able to remember it at that moment. And sometimes you're so engaged in your lesson that you do need a little bit of time just to say to the student, okay, let's get back to this a little bit later, but I'm going to have some time to research, or you go ahead and try and do some research as well.
Right.
About this. Yeah.
Right.
So it's all about fostering this kind of empathy and understanding
Mhm.
in the classroom. And once you have this atmosphere with your students, you create this atmosphere of understanding and the cultural differences as well. Because remember, me and Natalia, we've both had a lot of experience working abroad, and we've worked in different kind of environments as well, with different levels of students as well, coming from all different cultures. So now let's shift the gear a little bit. Let's think about now, how can learners embrace vulnerability in the language journey? So in the classroom, for example, I'm a student. How can I now embrace this vulnerability?
Uh, I guess it all begins with accepting what I was just speaking about, that you don't know something. You don't know something, and it's okay,
Mhm.
because there is a teacher to help you guys. The teacher is there not to fight with you, punish you, or I don't know, make you feel bad. The teacher is there to help you. Just ask. And like when, as I said, this computational moment is happening in the mind of a student, and you see it on the face, just ask, guys. Say, just, teacher, I don't know this, or how can I say this, or what does this word mean, or I don't remember something, or like, that's one thing. Ask for help. Or another thing, you are working on something, you are writing something or preparing a speech. Ask your teacher to give you feedback. Or like, your teacher says, like, good, well done. And you can say, like, teacher, I'm focusing on my, I don't know, accent or my vocabulary now. Can you give me
Mhm.
feedback about this? How I used it, like, so that the teacher can give you the exact
Mhm.
feedback that you needed at the moment.
Yeah.
And the third recommendation I can say, guys, just take risks. Remember that your goal. Remember in our first, when we discussed how to choose a teacher, we said that the most important thing is to remember how to choose a teacher. To remember your goal,
Yeah.
sorry. And your goal is to learn language. And why do you learn language? Most probably to communicate. So just take the risk. Just say it.
Mhm.
You need to deliver a message. If people understood you, that's it. That's all what matters. And if people didn't understand you, ask for help, repeat it again, ask for clarifications.
Mhm.
That's kind of where it starts. And it's practice. It takes
Yeah.
practice. It takes small steps.
Absolutely. And that is so true. Well said. I mean, being in this position is obviously our journey towards learning a new language. And we, as language learners ourselves and teachers and educators, we can't expect like to wave our magic wand and to learn everything so easily. I mean, or as Natalia said, it takes steps, and you do along the way trip up, and you do have to stand up again and then try. And it's all about practicing. So this vulnerability actually opens the doors to growth and transformation. In this process, you're actually transforming yourself, and you're growing while you're learning the language. So like many of my non-native students, when first exposed to English, as this is something which I have experienced as a teacher, they often were terrified to speak English. And the first time that they were ever exposed to a native teacher or even a non-native English teacher, obviously the very shy students opt to, not speak at all and not take any part in the lessons. So it's our job. I mean, I felt this as a huge kind of job on myself, and a challenge as well as a teacher, to motivate especially those kind of students who I can see that they have this spark in their eye. They really want to learn, but then you've got to kind of teach them that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to join the lesson and, to trip up sometimes. So some of the teaching methods that we use in the classroom, or even in our online lessons as well, is in order to help and support our students. For example, I used to do this a lot in the classroom, a reading dictation game. And this really helped because it gets all the students up and active, even the shy, quiet ones who are so afraid to make any mistakes.
Mhm.
And Later on, I can share how I used to do this game. I can share like a link in the description later on in the Instagram, so that you can try this kind of activity in your classroom. Another activity I used to find very successful, and it used to get even the shyest student up, which was called Stop the Bus. And this was a very simple vocabulary game. But again, you need at least like 20 children in the class, or so. You need a good size of students in the classroom. So this is really important that you agree to this and that you embrace this, that look, this is a language. This is not my language, of course. This is not what I'm used to hearing or listening to, but I've made this choice and I'm going to make the steps towards learning this. So it is absolutely fine to make those mistakes, as we've mentioned with me and Natalia, and choosing the correct teacher who's going to help you to support you along this way as well. That really also does help your journey too. So, Natalia, now, before we wrap up everything, do you have any other final thoughts that you would like to share about this topic?
Just like my final thoughts would be more like a pep talk, just like I just want to encourage you guys to embrace vulnerability in your language journey as you are learning it. If you're a teacher and trying to do something just in your real everyday life, that's where it also matters. And through this vulnerability, we really, truly connect to others. And this helps us to unlock all our potential in language learning, because we will be stuck at the same level we are if we don't try to tread into this unknown ground. So
absolutely. Yes, and I just wanted to add a little final as well, a little bit of a tip, should I say, about learning a new language, is practice. So I often hear this a lot from my students. I know everything about grammar and vocabulary, but I missed out on this opportunity to speak. And some students even say to me, well, I actually knew how to speak English before, but maybe they moved to a different country, or maybe for some reason they couldn't practice the language. So it's never too late. It's never too late to pick up where you left off and to continue this. And what's another good thing I find is giving students feedback as well. Like the feedback, as you mentioned as well, Natalia, right in the classroom while you're teaching the students, is to give them this, face-to-face feedback rather than leaving it for another day. It's nice to put students in this position where they can approach a teacher and say to them, oh, did I say that correctly? Or is that how you pronounce it? So it's very nice to check in with your teacher and to ask them, and never be shy to ask questions. I mean, we've all had very shy students, I'm sure, but once they break that bubble, believe me, they become a different person. And I've witnessed this. I mean, I'm so proud of some of my students who just come to my mind right now, where I'm thinking about them. They were those kind of students who you could not imagine they would get out from this bubble of, of shyness and making mistakes. So I was absolutely astonished to see this. And also trying new vocabulary. Often we get stuck with using the same vocabulary again and again. And often we don't expose ourselves to enough phrases. Another good thing is tongue twisters. I find tongue twisters really work with students, where it's a time to be silly and a time to practice the way you pronounce things as well. So we all kind of have a bit of a laugh when we do tongue twisters together. Right. And so learning is a risk, of course it's always going to be a risk, but it's a nice risk, I think. It's a risk worth taking. What would you say, Natalia? Do you agree, or have you had this
experience? It's a very rewarding one, because even as you were telling all these like techniques, and like especially like this practice where we can laugh as well, it's really where I immediately got some memories, and like my mind is now filled up with all those examples of both my students and myself when I am learning a language, or when I was learning English in the past. So yeah, definitely it's really rewarding experience, guys.
Yes. And
Definitely.
tonight has been very rewarding for, I have to say, speak for myself, and I'm sure I speak for Natalia as well. And well said, well said. I mean, this has been a real good experience for all of us to remember and to have those flashbacks as well of being in the classroom, meeting new students, especially who have never been exposed to English before, and seeing them develop. This, as a teacher, makes our whole job so much more satisfying, gives us this new motivation and energy. So, Natalia, that's a wrap, I think, for today's episode of Where Shall We Start? So, thank you all for tuning in, and please do join us next Monday, next week, to speak about, let me ask Natalia, have we got any clues about next week's topic?
That will be, guys, it will be something for you to really look forward to. But we will give
Aha,
you
surprise.
ideas about it later. Just like now, keep thinking and
Mhm.
keep learning. Stay open to mistakes and to any experience in your life. Embrace the journey of vulnerability and keep asking yourselves, where shall we start?
Thank you,
So,
Natalia. Thank you so
thank
much.
you
And
so
everyone for
much.
tuning in. Thank you for our viewers as well and our followers. We really appreciate your comments. We appreciate the fact that you joined us this evening as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. In the comments, please write what topics you would like us to discuss, because
Mhm.
we've got some ideas, but we would like to hear from you too. And for now, bye bye, everyone.
Yes,
Thank you,
see you,
Seema.
everyone. Good evening. See you as well, Natalia. Bye-bye.